Yeah, it's so amazing, isn't it? I think growing up on the island, something that I really learned a lot about was learning how to wait. I think that, perseverance and persistence is really something which really is valuable, where we are. Yeah, and then being able to integrate what's lost and being good at things such like this. Yeah, but we live in a world where the anthropomorphic sort of depictions of God is sort of can be sort of as a fallibleness or something, which that's not right. And that things that happen sort of that God could have some sort of negative human emotion or something, which that's sort of not right really either much. But that God could be sort of vengeful or take revenge and or that sort of thing, or even have some sort of partiality. It's amazing because in linguistics, and then the neurology of language, it's really possible to have a deeper insight today in subliminal and communication theory. And like, for instance, if you don't really know about neurolinguistics or perhaps more subliminal communication and things, this really is where things more are at, and I'd really love for us to be able to become more aware more of all of this, because intelligence where we are, if people are sitting in the car or you're just sitting listening to our show, intelligence really is the ability that you and I have to have gone beyond or to go beyond prefixed set patterns of response to be able to survive. Yeah, so that's the definition of intelligence, the ability to go beyond prefixed set patterns of response to survive. And so then you and I, we really have got to be able to think more outside the box. And that's something more inside you as you have this beautiful piece inside. And things on the outside could be sometimes a bit chaotic. But how you're being inside yourself and how relaxed your shoulders are, this sort of thing, But it's amazing because, you've got language and a confusion of the tongue, haven't you? And isn't thinking sort of a syntax that perhaps just been put as a sequence and people could have not necessarily considered what that sequence is that's going on. And certainly congruency is where there's a flow, and incongruency is where something is put which is juxtaposed to something else, But people could be aware not to polarize necessarily others, because that could be such error sort of in relation and things, and that fortifies and isolates, and that's the effect of that. But that is the communication is a response, that we're getting back, not what your intention was, But two negatives to make a positive, like as in counting, really sort of just has come into language more the Hindu Babylonian sort of influence more in our language. But for instance, like, they might spend $185,000 on a soldier, for instance, and I just sort of wonder how much they spend on a child, for education for the year. If it's $185,000 for a soldier in Afghanistan per year, So, Reuters sort of really is Tavistock, or we call that Travis stock, the travesty of the stock, Tavistock. Reuters, one soldier in Afghanistan can cost up to $1.4 million a year, and the big agri farmers are the ones who sort of really cashed in on changing those countries over to the bank, the count. Let's see. But Congress really, spending more than collected, and all the money that's created coming from debt to us in the public, but being created just perfectly from nothing in the private, and that is really should be constitutional money, and for us as a people, to be working again, But in 1851, Napoleon, he was really concerned that an octopus would strangle them, which has strangled the world today. Napoleon and the French people really were concerned, and others too, that the money was being taken away from being owned by the people. War is sort of really messy, isn't it, all of that? It's sort of a groveledness and a down-regulatedness in intelligence. But 1851, of course, a lot of stuff happened in the English sort of outlawed Catholicism sort of that year in the Parliament. And then across the waters there, Napoleon was really underway, and it was Napoleon III sort of coup d'etat. So there was a fellow that worked with Napoleon, Count de Saint-Arnaud. Yeah. Anyway, so Count de Saint-Arnaud, he was like looking over the Imperial Guard at the time, and anyway, there was a bit of a chaos happening outside, what have you, and a mob sort of was approaching, and but the Count de Saint-Arnaud, he had a bit of a cough, and he was coughing away a bit, and anyway, there was a lieutenant standing by, and as this sort of mob was approaching the Imperial Guard, the Count, he coughed, and he goes, massacrateur, and in French that sort of means my damn cough, But anyway, the lieutenant sort of heard that as a massacre them all, and rushed outside and ordered and fired on all the people that was outside, sort of killing thousands of these young boys sort of needlessly. And it was just really, an error, in language. But you really have a confusion of the tongues going on, and we've talked just a little bit about how people kind of shook hands with others and things before and after and during conflicts. But isn't it that we're doing what we can to clear up and clear away and diffuse? And shouldn't somebody do that, or are all these things just really being created because some condition is being created? Political condition. But if a country can just go ahead and be spending, like the United States, $40 billion, in diet food, a year, and then like saffron, Damon, that's sort of even worth more than gold, But you've got at any one point in time here in the United States, perhaps 50 million people doing diets and stuff, Yeah, but research certainly does show that saffron, Damon, and saffron does really decrease craving and that sort of thing. But, in the health and fitness, there's 46 billion spent in health and fitness. But, I know that the statistics in 2006, which it's advanced beyond, but I could tell you that in that year, of course, I think it was 600 billion something spent in military industrial budget. There was 9 billion spent on basic education in the whole of the world. 11 billion in that year was spent on ice cream, of course, in France. So, I wonder, it just sort of doesn't seem to me it really is intelligent, really, intelligence. But in whole brain functioning, you've got an energy and motion, and we have two needs, really. We have one set of needs in whole brain functioning, which come from our built-in drive to avoid pain, and so people have to have a house and security and let's see, status and things, all sorts of things like that, and relation and this. These are our instinctive sort of built-in drives to avoid pain. And these sort of you could call just sort of hygiene needs. And then as humans, we sort of really have a motivational need, and that's our sense of feeling to grow, to learn, to achieve, to recognise, and this is an internal generator, Lukey. And when you ask people what are the things that they really enjoy about their being, they'll share with you things which are motivational. And then if you ask a person what are the things which has upsetting or has upset, they typically would come up with some sort of more hygiene need, like something instinctual, sort of something which was they're doing to avoid pain. So, animals really, as animals, we're sort of animals really, in a way, of course. We self-medicate as animals do too. And a monkey could be seen in the morning folding up a very bristly long leaf and into a concertina, which takes them quite a bit to do that, and into a little square and then swallow it. And then they could be all seen to do this, and they just get the effect of that. It feels good because, of course, it is scraping nematodes off the inside of their intestinal tract, and they just get the effect of this. You see, it feels good. There's an instinctual need, really, that's equivalent to things which are more sort of having a built-in escalating zero. So what satisfied me on this instinct level yesterday or today may not necessarily satisfy me tomorrow. And so if somebody had pay, for instance, and then all of a sudden they took a bit of a cut, they wouldn't be motivated to do things necessarily. But that all these things have built-in escalating zeros, the instinct sort of need. But the motivational need doesn't have any escalating zero at all. You'll participate in this in and day out if you're feeling like you're growing, you're learning, you're achieving, you're getting recognition and recognised. You're having an internal generator. So people can have motivational needs being met if they're sort of in some art and things, and that's got their motivational needs met, but their hygiene needs might not be being met. Where somebody's hygiene needs are being met, like they've got a roof over their head, but they're not really feeling motivated in their life. So you've got in whole brain function, you've got these two ideals. You've got an ideal of a comfort in being where you are relatively, which that's one component of a balanced beingness, and then another is an ideal of just something which you're just quite not, that causes movement more forward. And so both these components exist sort of more in a matrix where somebody's sort of more imbalanced, But can the penny really drop? I mean, the idea that animals communicate and connect with each other, and people wondering about that and thinking that because they don't, that perhaps they can't think about or can be other than aware of the things that are going on, that's completely untrue. Animals do have very deep instinctive specialised sensitivity, just the same as human beings do, and there really isn't any difference much that can distinguish a human being really from an animal. ethnologists have searched and searched to see if they could find something and haven't been able to come up with anything. But even young savanna sparrows raised could have or one parent eaten by a snake and then another parent eaten by another bird or something, and then on the journey to eggs can have been raised totally just by foster birds, that came into the extended family during the time of a parent having gone missing, or something. There's a story, of course, of people at sea where they saw a walrus was being circled in on by a killer whale, and it was really, really bellowing. And they just observed this, but then dolphins came and circled around the walrus and protected it from the killer whale, and stayed with it for some time. And then some time passed by, and these people on the sea again heard the walrus bellowing, for its life as this killer whale was coming back in again. And as quick as a flash, these dolphins came back and circled in around the walrus and protected it in the sea. Pretty amazing. Of course, we've got beautiful stories of a man that was saved by a manta ray that came off into the water and felt something very huge underneath, and eventually found out that it was a manta ray, but that it had kept him at the surface because he'd been struggled to stay, afloat, and stayed with him for some few days at sea, causing him to be able to actually really get into land. But you've got the story of Mavis the elephant in Las Vegas, of course, but every time everybody ever went past the marquee, the entrance to the marquee, sort of Mavis would go out and grab that person, bring them in, and put them down by the centre of the marquee where there was a sweet box, and she'd sort of wave her trunk back and forward and pausing at the sweet box, it was a bit frightening to people because she'd do that a little bit, and she's pretty strong, she'd go over and pick you up with her trunk, but very gentle. This particular day she did that, and she was pausing at the sweet box, and the person that she did it to sort of looked up, saw that the sweet box was locked, and was like, oh, gee, this is not good. Anyway, just when the Mavis is swinging her trunk in the other direction, this person sort of makes their way toward the marquee sort of slowly, like, don't want to rush, don't want to chase, incite the chase instinct of Mavis. But anyway, getting close to the marquee exit and felt something very looming behind, and turned around, and there's Mavis looming over this person, of course, and Mavis drops the key. But the idea actually that there isn't any communication isn't sort of true, certainly not, and that there's a great a deep awareness that actually animals do communicate to each other, But there really is no such thing as negation at the primary level of experience, you see. And Red Cloud, when he would be describing of this, said that there was sort of a confusion of forked tongues, about two negatives to make a positive, like what he's in counting. It sort of really didn't make sense to them when they said, we're not going to put every one of you on a reservation, or they said, we're not going to kill all the buffalo. How can you not see a pink elephant with blue polka dots running across green grass? Or what's your representation that the dog is not chasing the cat? There's no such thing as negation at the primary level of experience. And adults slowly apparently learn that if you put something negative in front of it, it means that it does negate whatever it was that was after that. But there is no such thing as negation at the primary level of experience at all. And I think it's fair really to say that, a lot of confusion sort of is going on. But anyway, at some point I really would love for us to talk a bit more about language and that, And but we need technical teachers and the anthropomorphic sort of depiction of God sort of being all this fallible stuff and things isn't really eye-aware. But eye-awareness really is stemming more from more of an astral consciousness, and Toltec being Atlantean, but infinite and not sort of manipulative or to weak employed sort of forces. But God really of reality is not subject really to being pleased or displeased or even appeased. In eye awareness, this is equivalent to realization of limitedness and inability, but then also to the capacity to be able to forgive more. Because people out there in the world that have been created sufferedness for life, they don't really know what they're doing. And this awareness really is equivalent to benevolence and being benevolent. And then people in the past who are benevolent, they cause us to our electrics to be strong versus leaders that are really not benevolent at all. But in eye awareness, you really have the ability to counterbalance all that sort of negative phantom stuff. But anyway, you've really got to have a breakthrough, now, once and for all time, and start using your mind now to sort of empty out, so really what's useful can sort of flow in, and stop worrying, all the worry and things, so that it's possible really to be able to have a more practical ability and take on these eye awareness tools to assist you, bring out more your inner voice, which, as you're in eye awareness, this is equivalent to expression more in affection and having affection, and then that's clearing away all this parental alienatedness, where children can have not had the ability to express affection, and that is injury. And the same for a parent also, where child alienation can have been. But that is the reality where we are in a social engineered world, which is really wrong, all that social engineeredness. But once and for all time, people should let go all of that positionality and things. Otherwise, a lot of error and sufferedness sort of exists, people do not know what the condition is of, or the limitation of that, trying to improve upon the present or trying to improve upon the past or the future, which you can't do. But this omnipresence is your not personalness, but being more in your third person, and this is sort of a way out where we are. And this is where somebody was their person. It's sort of a dualistic era of opposite, where ego was of separateness and difference and conflictedness and conflict, and heal and defend position is equivalent much more not to judge matter, really, because that's just hoisting ever more sail. If you care very much for a conciliation, you have to have two candidates. One person is to be forgiven and the other is forgiving. And one has to forgive themselves typically because they've triggered themselves so many times that something can have occurred. But eye awareness really is equivalent to a spiritual good and equivalent more to what's mutually beneficial. Yeah. And eye awareness really is equivalent more to our own inner voice, and out of the 10,000 tunnel ranges, there's just really one voice, and as you're hearing this voice, you really should be paying attention. Yeah. But eye awareness is equivalent to love, is equivalent to God, is equivalent to am, I am, or a negation, a negative force, sort of is really powerlessness, and that's sort of really equivalent to force, you see. Yeah. But an enormous amount of money, isn't it, that's spent by CERN, over there in Switzerland, that gigantic underground racetrack, that tiny little particles speed around. It's a high-speed accelerator. But apparently accelerated little particles are 300,000 kilometres per second, and it's around a 27 kilometre tunnel, which is more than 1,200 sort of super magnets, and each of those magnets are like 14 metres, in length, and you've got an enormous expense, haven't you? It's in the billions what has to be done, but reaching 99.99% of the speed of light to explode at temperatures, in the billions of degrees of centigrade. You've got little 4 points sort of collision where things are measuring devices measure what goes on there and all that sort of thing. But once, just to find several million packages of protons per second, it can cost 1.9 billion, and that's just an enormous amount of money spent on that large hadron collider, and it's just out to lunch, isn't it? I think it's unbelievable, you see. I think we've got things going on in the world where there's an enormous brain drain, where people don't even know what natural birth is. How's that, But you've got a disembodied professor-like sort ofness where only didacticness has been in education and not anything experiential, and then quants have come to be quantifiedness versus qualifiedness, and very little qualified sort of research, which our human condition and being in nature involves more qualitative ways of investigating things. But being in a world where people have all these positions and things, that sort of really stopped a lot of stuff from going anywhere and caused people to just have been stuck, perhaps, But you really are drawn forward that there's a great deep mystery, and you can ever learn ever more powerfully by being more eye-aware and tuning into your own process and making everything about your own personal development more, and focusing more where you are, because this is really gold, your own personal development. But negative force is sort of really, as we were saying, it sort of is a powerlessness and causes limited mind function, and that's equivalent to force, and movement is really not motivation. You've got movement, you've got positive sorts of movement where you've got positive forms of carrots out in front, dangling, and people are just motivated by things in front of them, and they just do stuff like that. Or otherwise it's sort of a kick in the pants, and they're doing movement stuff, and these are positive and negative forms of KITA, which spells kick in the pants, which is not motivation at all, you see. You have to motivate, and the Palestinians and the Israelis and Americans and Norwegians, Australians and Canadians and people in Morocco and Europe and everywhere, we all need to be more motivated, and you need conversation between countries and leaders and people, which is more whole brain patterning, and getting on with the very things which are issues rather than people just at the moment being reported apparently just walking around like moonstruck cows, a bit of it in a daze, just waiting for the inevitable. But pleasure neurologically inhibits aversion, and the pleasure and the septal region of our brain in whole brain functioning neurologically inhibits the amygdala and tegmentum, and you've got to have a large enough resource state present to collapse any stuck state, you see. But Bambi doesn't ever forget where the tiger is. And you've got only just what's too much, what's not enough, and you've got this polarized completeness. And in aversion, if somebody was aversed, the positive part of their state of being, it can have been taken up more by mania and cheerless sort of happiness, which was laughter at people's distress, and amygdala typically can be atrophied or enlarged and be not at a proper size because of stress in utero and things, But all these things, people can be furloughed ever more by being taught more whole brain patterning, you see. But you've got segregated, isolated, separated, secretarian, and distracted, and isolated, and difference, and you've got people put at the same age, and then there's no learning from older ones and younger ones, which is ethne. So ethne becomes broken the moment you start to do stuff like that to humans. And then there's no learning. People only are put to be with others that have just subjective type of reasonness, of concreteness, and so like a God, an image, and ideas of that could be just ending up as the Father Christmas up in the sky sort of thing, and not abstract reasoning, which over time comes to be more. But this really happens as a result of people being able to be with older and younger, and all walks of life being more together as it's supposed to be. But if you you're just creating an armed prostitute to commit legalized sin, and all of that sort of stuff. Otherwise, but as far as helping the enemy is concerned, anything that diffuses and is always used to diffuse and things is the very things which are meant to be, because why shouldn't you take the path of least resistance? And certainly where official misconduct has been because no oversight existed, it should be existing, it should be existing, yes, and that's very important. But if former enemies shook hands during and before and after, these are the things that can have occurred to resolve things. Otherwise, people are just locked into dualistic preoccupiedness and don't have any ability to correct anything, and that's not having proper good attention draw, you see. But being stuck in right and wrong, like you can put something in a bucket or count it, which a lot of these things you can't, it's not, and that is very dichotomous and doesn't have any exit, and it's just a looped, polarized sorting of incongruence and going over the same stuff, you see. And then it's better that one would frame things positively to say, why have I been spared to give this to you? But I awareness really is equivalent to avoided negative depictions of I, really, right? Yeah. I really is not that jealous, angry, destructive, sort of vengeful, contractual type of burdened phantom-like fiction put in people's heads, which is really a lack of understanding, and that's equivalent to debt, you see, which is sin, and that's equivalent to really a messed upness or really a missed opportunity to learn how to respond more effectively where we are. But why not have conversation about this? Why not clear up and reframe and create meaningfulness and more meaningful context in things to create meaningfulness for those actions and clear away the prejudicial state of being. But why would you want to do this if you're living in a goat jumping on top of another goat, where you only, because of error, you have a greater gross national product? See, that's wrong. You have to correct this. You can't go on another day knowing that all money is created from debt. New money is created from debt. See, that's wrong. Money never used to be created that way, and 9 times in the history of American, you have people owning the growth of the money supply, and that needs to be again, all right? And so otherwise, people are just being controlled, and you're being allowed to be controlled, and you're doing this, not anybody out there. But this really is eclipse in the grassroots movement to economic egalitarianism, and I-awareness is really you and I transcending all of that negativity to know that it's just sort of bottom of cocky cage stuff and down-regulatedness, really, not up-regulating, which is more you and I coming more from love in ourselves and I-awareness versus the reptile brain. But there's a great difference from vanity of ego, which is really equivalent to I, and it's certainly without am, see, always, and disconnected and discombobulated. I and am are not connected. But I-awareness is equivalent to the smallest task, serving the whole, and this is you inside, thinking and feeling how powerful you are rather than powerless. And everybody feeling this rather than everybody wondering how we all will do this. Right? And everybody's wondering that. But voluntary adherence as we're going forward with everything really is not sort of any proselytizement, because why should you do that? There's no reason to. That's the path of most resistance. You've got everybody on the earth right now tick the box. Yes, you want reform in banking. That everybody cares for this. That's it. No one needs to be educated further. And let the educated ones figure it out. Take a year off. That's what a moratorium means. But you're on no obligation and no investment at all to correct things, which should be just because that makes sense. This is making sense. And this is not any zealot enthusiasm. Why should you have to have a zealot enthusiasm to do what's natural? That's ridiculous. Zealot enthusiasm to have to do that would be certainly not equivalent to any truth or belief in what we're talking about, carrying out these instructions, which is the most important instruction that's being given, in the time that we're spending with each other, is what you're doing afterward as we've connected with each other. But religion would have just been a submission to authority for the sake of certainty, and that certainly is a dogma. And this, which we're talking about, really is you ever more valuing your voice inside and making what makes sense come from you and your voice. Yeah. Is this making sense, Lukey?
Yeah, Dr. Job. It's every word.
Well, you've really got all sorts of things and products that could come to be, waters and things that can really help hydrate versus water that doesn't really hydrate much at all. You've got people could be learning more about what learned helplessness is neurologically, which stay tuned because that's something which we're really coming to ever more. We're teaching people to be more empathic, and some of this really teaching and awareness can only come to be because you can have a feeling of pity upon people who are suffering and sufferedness, and then it's possible for these teachings and these programs and this about eye awareness can make more sense to you. But what we've just said is that where eye-aware brain is born with, and then a travesty of the stock occurs for energy to be harvested by teaching people to go up the scale and only giving them 440, and injuring so that they don't have any control, to have created learned helplessness. And that's equivalent to the New World Order, which what's going on today is the same as the 2007 New York City lockdown that happened, where 10,000 quality of life crimes just completely went uninvestigated, and a great deep sufferedness is existing right now, which is not a republic or a democracy or even constitutional, where a weather weapon can be used and monopolization is existing, and you've got eugenics on the guidestones and tranquilizers being used by our leaders, and a loss of excellent ability to have a spatial awareness and capacity really to work with a little bit more complexity rather than just one brainwave. But this all-seeing eye really is a multiple of brainwaves, which is really a confluence of energy that comes from your happiness, love, and your wisdom. And this is I am. And this is the all-seeing eye. And that is absolutely not equivalent to bureaucracy of one wave, one brain, bureaucratical or bureaucite, one wave, one brainwave, which is frightening when the all-seeing eye is connecting with someone who just is only trained to do one brain function stuff. But you can be more going through life with your mind more asleep and have more delta, powerful waves happening because of a synchronization happening from your hemispheres of your brain, and having more amplitude of electricity and voltage available to you versus that all being chopped up. But eclipse really is this, let's have a breathing space, let's take a break, let's just tick the box, yes, you want to perform in banking, let's tick the box, yes, you want to perform in education, let's tick the box, you want to perform in the judicial system, let's tick the box, you want to perform in military spending, But let's just tick the box, you want to perform in banking. That's all. This is very powerful. But you can have a positive impact on those people around you. You can use whole brain functioning principles more, and you can be focused ever more on where the roof is leaking versus just sort of having attention to stuff which wasn't leaking versus just sort of having attention to stuff which wasn't leaking versus just sort of having attention to stuff which wasn't leaking versus